Hey everybody, Marilyn Kibler here. Welcome to session 9. We're delighted that you're with us tonight. And as you know, ATW is changing the face of technology with women. Our mission is to increase the number of women in leadership and strengthen the pipeline of girls entering STEM. And we do it through educational programs like this. And all funds that are being raised this evening are going to our Great Minds program, which is our community outreach program targeted for young, underserved girls to help them become interested in STEM. And we also provide direct scholarships to send girls to physics and engineering camps and to provide custom tailored programs where girls can learn leadership skills and advance their knowledge in STEM fields. And I'm Marilyn Kibler-Colon, president of DFW, ATW, and a business development partner at Verizon. And so I'm so happy to welcome to the stage, a big welcome to session 9, a fireside chat on cybersecurity. See something, say something. And I'd like to welcome first to the stage Sherri Wolfe, Senior Vice President, Treasury Management Office at Dallas Capital Bank. Hey, Sherri, welcome to the stage.
Thank you.
And to round out our panel tonight, please help me welcome Glenn Roman, Executive Vice President, Risk Management from Summit Group.
Hey, gang.
Hey, Glenn. Good to
How
see
are
you.
you?
I'm
Great to see you.
delighted to have this opportunity to be with such distinguished guests. And so to kick off, I'd like to ask our guests here to introduce themselves, take a couple minutes. Both of these panelists, Sherri and Glenn, have amazing careers, long history of working in the financial services industry, came up through their careers in different segments of the industry. And I'd like to start with Sherri. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into banking.
Good evening. Glad to be here. So let's see. Right now, as Marilyn already shared with you, I'm a Senior Vice President over Treasury and Deposit Services with Dallas Capital Bank. And my career with banking started a long time ago, where I actually started my career with large corporate, calling on Fortune 500s, really migrated from East Coast to the Midwest and talking with them about major platforms and treasury services and integrating those platforms with their banking and their financial needs. So it was interesting because when I left there and started kind of having a family, our family purchased a mid-sized business, and with that, I was able to really get involved with the ERP and CRM kind of platforms, and started to sell that and try and integrate that with other companies. And because we were so involved in just knee deep in everything, working as a small business owner, that I really started to have a passion and appreciate small and mid-sized businesses in particular, and owners, and what they're dealing with in regards to all the treasury needs, all the banking needs, compliance needs, security issues. That it really motivated me to go back and work for a bank that's really high-end service and really does believe in technology. Both of those aspects were really critical to me. So that's where my passion kind of came from, is really living on both sides of that equation, right? And trying to navigate between the two. And right now, I just love what I'm doing, working with these companies, rolling up my sleeves. We're having some pretty difficult discussions right now in regards to cyber fraud and security, and what that means and how we can help. So boy, I'm getting here because it really does make me very excited. Hence being with you tonight. So thank you.
Oh, Sherri, that sounds great. And Glenn, you have a deep background in risk management and casualty and property risk systems. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. So right now I serve as an executive vice president at Summit Financial Group here in Dallas. Summit is a boutique Dallas-based brokerage specializing in benefits, insurance, and investments, really focused on middle market type organizations and, helping them really manage and mitigate risk. So I've been in the business for 30 years. It's all I've ever done. I like to think I've got to be pretty good at it, just because if you're doing the same thing for 30 years, you better be good at it. But no, I've really been blessed with the business, and it went very early on in my career from a job to a career to a passion, and it's something that I really, really enjoy. My primary and everyday focus is really helping my client partners manage and mitigate risk by providing creative risk transfer and risk management, cost containment solutions, and my overall focus is to reduce total cost of risk and enhance balance sheet outcomes. So what many years ago, and for some is transactional, for me it's really getting involved and getting to be a part of meaningfully in an organization and help them achieve optimized balance sheet outcomes. Obviously cyber right now is one of those, I say emerging risks only because it's not stopping. We started to see the proliferation of cyber exposures and cyber risks 10 to 12 years as we look back, and it just continues to grow exponentially. So, happy to be here tonight, happy to leverage some of my experience to the benefit of the group, and just humbled and privileged to be here among my two colleagues, Sherri and Marilyn.
Well, we're delighted to have you. And so let's start talking cyber and cybersecurity and talking about seeing something and saying something. And I know both of your specialties are in small, medium business, and you both have also large enterprise expertise. And we're seeing as the industries kind of converge with cyber around handling cyber fraud and cyber security, because no business is free from having to manage and have something in place for cybersecurity. The bad
Right.
actors out there, they hit the big companies as well as small companies. So we're seeing, kind of a convergence of, and especially with systems and solutions being offered today in the cloud, and the pricing models where small, medium businesses can afford some of these fairly sophisticated cybersecurity systems. So, we're starting to see business taking advantage of both technology and processes to mitigate their risk. And we're also seeing cyber guys, bad actors, also still ahead of the game there. And the other things that I've noticed that will kind of parlay into our conversation here is the familiar tactics. Like we're all, whatever company we work with, we're all cautioned on opening emails, everything from opening emails that don't look right, or make sure you look at the email address carefully. But we're also seeing from a IT perspective, web applications are are so open, and the things that we can do, we love our phones and we love our devices, and providing security around the new ways that we've had to live in COVID is also some key things that we're starting to see the industry having to respond to. So let's set the stage here. How bad is it? Because we hear all these studies and see all these kinds of stats. So from your perspective, Glenn, how bad is it out there? What's going on? And has COVID upped the percentages, or up the ante, if you will, for cyber risk?
Well, I'll as we had kind of discussed before we joined, I'll start on a more macro level. So I'll go as macro as you can get. How bad is it? It's bad. It's not as macro as you can get. But just some stats that I pulled up is if cybercrime around the world, it's pervasive, and unfortunately, it's just getting worse. And the current pandemic, unfortunately, is being exploited as well, and they're finding new hooks and new nooks and crannies and ways to exploit a system under stress now as we move to a more mobile workforce as well. But just to give you some idea of what we're dealing with is If cybercrime were a country, again, we're going to start big to small, it would have the 13th highest GDP in the world. If cybercrime were a country. According to a study commissioned by Bromium, cybercrime generates around it, both from the bad players and people trying to shore it up and insurance transfer. Cybercrime generates $1.5 trillion a year.
Wow.
1.5 trillion. So it's huge. Worldwide, the cost of cybersecurity will reach 133 billion by 2022. So just the cost of cybersecurity, nothing to do with the breach, nothing to do with the data that's mined, but just the cost of the security alone is going to be 133 billion by 2022. 68% of business leaders feel cybersecurity risks are increasing. I think more of them should feel that. Data breaches exposed 4.1 billion records in the first part of 2019. 4.1 billion individual records in a 6-month period of 2019. 71% of the breaches were financially motivated. 53% of the breaches featured hacking. 28 involved malware, and 32% involved phishing, and another 33% involved social engineering. Hackers attack every 39 seconds on an average of 2,244 cyber attacks a day worldwide. The average lifestyle of any given breach, so any one incident for any one entity, it takes about 11 months to work through it. What types of breaches are we seeing? We know the more common ones, but basically by percentage from big to small, 90% of the incidents that we experience are initiated by email, social media, or text. So we understand what happens with the email, right? It says looking for a new and exciting job, and she hits the click, and then the clowns go around and all the computers shut down, and she's got her job because she's going to get fired. But then you've also got social media and all the information. What happens is we're so happy to share everything about us, on social media, and there are pictures of our family and our friends and the places that we visit and our license plate numbers and everything that's on all of our social media. And we don't stop and think that there's value to that, to the bad guys, if you will. The newest one that I've seen personally, because I have apparently 3 or 4 packages waiting for me as I speak, is I just get a text from a random number saying your Amazon package has been on hold since June. Click this hot link to come claim it. And then the next day it's from the U.S. Postal Service. Then I might have one from FedEx. And so at least I hope the packages are nice when I go recover them, right? So, it's constantly evolving. And I think that's, Ann Chow said something today, and I think we need to really, this is a watershed moment, and something we all really need to focus on. Is Ann said, and I wrote some notes here, the COVID-19 accelerated digital technology facilitation by 5 years. So without COVID, without this incident, without having to do what we're doing, it would have taken 5 years to get where we're at today from a digital technology standpoint. So will it accelerate the cyber risk and the cyber breach that we have by 5 years. And they're always out in front of us. And in addition to that, we've got more individuals out, and we'll talk a little bit about this later, using a varied types of devices and Wi-Fi and what have you. But the cyber criminals are all working from home as well. So I think we have to take that into account. So with that, Sherri, I'd pass the question now to you.
Okay, good. Thank you. It's interesting when we ran through these statistics together, Glenn and I were kind of jaw dropping, and we get to review it over and over because we're still kind of staggered by the numbers, right?
Yeah.
So what is interesting to note, and we all hear about the events on the news, the Amazon example, the Facebook that's texting us, saying, oh, you've got a friend who wants to talk to you. We are so engaged with this thing over here that we're constantly on it. We're constantly trying to do work on it. And matter of fact, we're toggling because we're all multitasking between social, work, trying to balance the home life, that this has been a great tool. But what I have really been seeing is that large corporate, those huge numbers that they were talking about, is really getting squeezed in now to the middle market businesses. So that gulf that used to be there at one time is really shrinking. There was an interesting study done by Pricewaterhouse, and it was a 2020 fraud survey. And of the respondents, about 50% of them said that they had a significant fraud impact. And by significant, what they meant is something that lasted in resolution, an average of that 11-month time frame. Think of the resources and the financial impact associated with that, right? And then of those, and I'm kind of narrowing in a little bit, because what I want us to understand is that we are tonight going to really try and focus on the external perpetrator, right? The email fraud, the SMB for SMBs, in particular, the business email compromise that happens where they're phishing, people are ghosting you. And believe me, they're very, very patient. They're going to really watch and see what those transactions are all about. They're going to have a list on you, on me, on us, in regards to things like account numbers, who's on vacation, who are the signers? What does that signer look like? So that's 60% of all those fraud events were around that. And before, we used to really be focused on internal fraud. So I'm going to show you a slide, if you'll bear with me, and I'm going to ask you guys to please go ahead. I'm going to share this screen, and what I want you guys to do is just click on it and expand it a little bit if you don't mind, and then I'll stop sharing it in a minute so that you can really see this data. But what is interesting to me is that Pricewaterhouse gave about 15 points associated with what was that significant fraud event about. And they broke it out by industry segment. So I'm just going to pick on telecommunications, media, telecom there, that final column there. And as you can see, cybercrime and customer fraud, those are the two primary external events that are coming in and attacking large corporate as well as mid-sized businesses, and 20% and 13% respectively in that particular industry. If you look across the board, what you're going to find is, I think the numbers were 6 out of 7 of those are associated with the cyber crime specifically, and then 4 out of the 7 were dealt significantly with the customer fraud. And when I say customer fraud, it's really defined as those who look like our customer, who come in, maybe they have a false ID, maybe they're emailing you for business associated with looking like a customer, and they want to come in and talk to you. So that's any kind of business enterprise. It's maybe a vendor that says you owe us a bill, and it looks like a real true vendor. So that's kind of the distinction between of those. Cybercrime is very specifically associated with the ghosting, phishing, the BEC compromise, that business email compromise, and then malware. With that, the intention there is to put malware in there so that they can track you with the ultimate hope of being able to get your credentials and either take information, A, or B, financial. So that's all kind of mind-boggling to me, to be honest. So I'm going to go ahead and for me, for framing purposes, that's where I'm going to really kind of play, is to kind of focus in on, and that's what we're trying to do, is that external fraud event and what we can do and work around with that.
So thank you for that setup and the landscape. I mean, the landscape with all the bad actors, and then you have all the different tactics that they use. So, Glenn, what kind of going back to you and your macro view and your experiences and working with your clients, what are there specific industries that you see hit more aggressively, Or are there industries that pop up that are just prime targets for these bad actors and for cyber fraud specifically?
Yeah, typically financial institutions and technology companies. I have a matrix here. I didn't plan on having that question, but yeah. So, did we have a slide on that, Sherri? The specific industries that were kind of more hit than others?
Well, when we spoke, we were talking about media, telecommunications. I think, Sherri, were some of the things we were
Healthcare,
talking about. Yeah.
finance, technology. Yeah, those are the ones that you really want to look at where there's exposure. And now, granted, the bigger companies, their security and support is getting more robust. So both industries and size of company it's evolving. The lid's kind of off because as the security system around the technology gets more robust, they have to go to different areas. So we're seeing smaller companies hit. We're seeing different industries hit. And I really think that the hottest platform right now are multi-industries, but using this device, right? What are we doing? We're doing our banking here. We're doing our insurance here. So we're seeing a proliferation of claims around the use of smartphones and electronic devices. Yeah.
We have an interesting comment here in our chat that I wanted to share. It's an agreement from one of the ladies in our audience that their company, they deal with fake customers fraud all the time. So, I'll take a question here. Would Sherri or Glenn have any suggestions about the best practices to prevent customer fraud? And I know I'm just going from super macro to a very specific question, but it was such a timely question. I thought I'd pose that to you, to one of you.
I was just going to say from a very specific perspective, what I find really, banks are highly regulated. I'm in the industry. I've been in it for a long time. We've got all sorts of reports. The FBI is monitoring activities very closely. The one thing that I kind of do as just a precautionary measure for me is, and I'll cover this in more detail later, but I have a tendency to maybe move too fast, especially when it comes to emails, right? So now if I get a new email from a client, because I'm in business development as an example, so I see the signature line. Now, if it's new to me and I'm not expecting it, I am definitely looking at other resources. I maybe call the company I go up to Google and I check in on Google and I find out, does this look right? Is the address correct? Does this person even work there? It is amazing, right? What you can find out just by some minor searches. And if it still looks right, but it doesn't feel right, if it just has that feeling to it, I am lucky enough, and all businesses have someone like this because we're all IT dependent, right? You can call somebody and they can actually do a search on kind of where that email is coming from. I don't typically try and trust the phone number on an email because there too, they can change a digit. They can manipulate that so that when you call and you find out what the company name is, you see what I mean? So I don't know if that helps address it, but those are some tactics that I have personally used. And it's kind of been very, how do I say it? Comforting, actually, if I do call back, right? So I know they exist. I know that they're at the address they say they are. So
I think from a risk standpoint, it's again maybe a little bit macro and it'll be a common theme. We'll address it a little bit later too. But I think a lot of managing cyber risk right now is just a paradigm change in how we look at it. Traditionally you had either IT and management or IT and finance kind of look at it. That's not going to do it now. Managing cyber risk really becomes this all-in, enterprise-wide, 360-degree approach to managing it. It's got to be all hands on deck and all eyes aware of what's going on. IT, if there's a C-suite, you've got legal, you've got HR, you've got the employees themselves. Sit down and communicate with your employees, right? There's a stat I'll bring up a little bit later on if we get there, and it's 80% of employees never click. 5% of employees click on everything.
Wow.
And find them. You have to find them. They're the ones, right? And it's sneaky. I had a claim with one of my large technology accounts, and the controller sent an email to the CFO, and the CFO sent an email back to the controller, and a $35,000 check was sent to Coca-Cola. And then the controller sent an email to the CFO,
Wow.
and the CFO sent an email to the controller, and a $45,000 check was sent. Well, when they looked at it closer, the email was from someone at coca-cola.org, which is not
Oh, wow.
Coca-Cola's website. And someone had taken
Yeah.
the logo, and they knew who the CFO was, and they knew who the controller was. And, luckily we caught it at just about 100,000. I think the whole claim paid out for about 250 with claims expenses and everything else. But they're sneaky, right? And so all in, everybody has to buy in. We got to educate. We got to find those 5% of the employees that are going to just click away. They're going to go check for their packages at Amazon and USPS and for the new job and everything else. And so really that's, if I was going to give my 2 cents on that specific issue, it really is a macro all in approach.
Well, and what I love about this is the fact that that company followed the process in play, right? I have this email. It's for an invoice. I need to send it to B person. B person
Right.
gets it. I need to send it
Yeah.
to C to confirmation.
Yeah.
So it isn't just the click. Along that whole pathway, somebody could have gone, this so it doesn't really, so it's the whole idea of you've got the process right. Now to Glenn's point, it's about really slowing down, making sure it feels right, it looks right, and that's hard. It's hard when you're running a business. It's hard when you've got your stack over here and people knocking on the door and demands being made, and you've got an appointment to go to, especially in this fast-paced world where expectations are increasing. So, it's that reviewing that process again, when an event like that happens, maybe we need to incorporate something here, because the fraudsters changing, emails changing, software's changing, and to stay with the old process or not tweak it and practice it enough, it can get you into trouble. Sorry.
So I want to add to that. And I'll segue back to the first part of this question, because the texter's question got us to the second part of it. It's harder when that bag that you're sitting next to is the bag that you use to take your dog for a walk, and the door that you closed is the one to your living room, and you're at home and you're using your Wi-Fi and you're using your personal device and your company's laptop. And now we got to still have all those same checks and balances. By the way, IT, we now have 850 or 250 employees all doing that from home, all on different Wi-Fis, all with different doors to close, kids running in, dogs coming over, all of that. And yet we still have to keep the integrity of that loop. And so it's a big job. And so, part of this, the question, first part of this question that we're answering in reverse is, how has the pandemic or how's COVID impacted things? Well, it's sea change. Okay. Because again, the acceleration of the utilization of technology just in all of our day-to-day, the fact that we're doing it from home with unique distractions and things. And again, Bob Jones' Wi-Fi and his, router that he got for $18 that his community association all worked off of, and the password is password. And that's what for our companies are being protected, right? In addition, I said it earlier, half jokingly, but the cyber criminals have always worked from home. Nextly, we have more displaced workers with more time on their hands and need access to capital. So we have more creative criminals learning on the dark web on how to do this stuff and going and giving, finding new ways to do it.
Yeah.
I also think, home networks less secure. We've got company privacy policies have to be relaxed to accommodate the immediate, export of 250 employees out to a mobile workforce. So, I think the other thing is, some of these phishing and social engineering scams are using COVID and people's, weakness at a difficult time as a hook too.
Yeah, pulling at their heartstrings.
COVID
Yeah.
relief or whatever it is, and so it's tough. It's a tough time, but we'll get into there's some basics and some logic and some simple things that we can do. And cloud computing is helping us leverage larger providers' resources to the benefit of smaller organizations and stuff. So that's my, I guess, doom and gloom.
But I think there's a huge factor of reality in there. I was in a meeting today, and the example was similar that you used, Glenn, where dogs are running and kids are slamming doors and those things. But he said his high school son was gaming on the, he competes with the laptop for gaming, I guess, for his work. And you just think, here you have, your family that is probably a different, maybe there's, like you said, there's different levels of security in your home architecture versus work. And the whole point of this discussion is how do we as corporate citizens and people in technology raise the home infrastructure to the level that the business infrastructure is, because the two are coming together, and COVID is driving them together very quickly. So that kind of, it's a great segue into this kind of the second, kind of bringing it down a little bit more on some best practices. It's, you did a great job sharing, the environment, is landscape is really bad right now, and COVID certainly doesn't help it at all. So what are some of the best practices and some of the things that you've seen? And Glenn, I'll start with you again on this one to set the stage. What, from a risk management perspective, what are you telling your clients about and giving them in terms of some best practices?
Thank you. So, this is, I'm a keep it simple, apply logic back to basics kind of approach to things. And, have a plan, right? Be aware, communicate, secure your network. You've got updates, basic updates built in with your software suites. Use those. When it says it's time for update or something's expired, make sure that you've got a process to do that. I had mentioned cloud computing. I think there's been a 37 or 38% year over year increase in cloud computing. And, not only is it scalable and flexible and unlimited and what have you, but it's third-party cloud computing. So if there's some sort of a cyber breach, they've got all the juicy stuff. They've got the juicy protections. They've also got the insurance. And if you have 10,000 records that get breached on this cloud server, you've got a third party and another layer of protection to insulate you from a liability standpoint. So, really consider that. Need to have an incident in response process, and you have to test it. You have to do your backup, two-factor authentication, encrypt your data, train and test your employees, evaluate who has access and credentials to get to critical data, whether it's IP or customer data or financial data. Make sure you understand that. Evaluate processes that rely on email and manage and monitor those. What's the other way? Educate and inform your team, right? Make sure that your employees know that we shouldn't be impulsive, we shouldn't be greedy, and we shouldn't be curious. We're here for business, right? Back to that 80% of employees never click, 5% click on everything, know who they are. Communicate, and manage your passwords. We'll put up a list of passwords that people use later. And I guarantee we've got a room of 20 something people in here. Of the top 10 or 15 passwords, we might have a bunch of those on this list of people here. So manage your passwords and don't post them in a conspicuous place and what have you. So just basics and logic and use the tools that you've got. And Sherri, with that, I would pass that to
Yeah.
you.
Well, and I did want to touch back on something too, because it kind of moved pretty fluidly there in regards to COVID, because, again, my focus is all about, because 71% of these fraud events are financially motivated. It is really important to understand how many touch points are going on in that particular space. There is the FBI has the U.S. Treasury has a monthly report that they do. And in July, during COVID, we were noted to the fact that cyber security in particular was rampant, especially, believe it or not, with those organizations that are our healthcare providers, with people who are involved with COVID. So in assisting our businesses and our communities. So that was a little heart-wrenching for me, candidly. But one of the things, they actually have some action plans. And Glenn noted most of those, but the biggest issue right now that was noted in this particular article was exactly around the business email compromise. So if I were to really say anything in particular right now, it would be just to slow down, to really look at those emails, because there is a lot of issues, especially if you're in your accounting area or your bookkeeping or your accounts receivable or accounts payable department. It is really important to kind of secure all your your enterprise platforms. I am going into businesses all the time, and this is where I see passwords. And this is, if I go to someone's home, I'll see it on their computer monitor, right? Because they don't want to forget it. So those are things that anybody can take advantage of. I'm part of an association called the Association of Financial Professionals. And again, I'm going to make you expand on this slide because I think it's important enough to show you some of those payment channels that are being impacted today. Some of these have always remained flat. Right now, we're lucky that they're kind of remaining flat. This was a 2020 survey, so it's the latter part of this last year. And what you see here is that checks incorporate about 74% of the fraud events. So that means anybody in accounts payable who sees an invoice coming in and they happen to write checks for it, those can get compromised. But what's really increasing right now is ACH risk, the automated clearinghouse, direct deposit payroll. That's where your Zelle payments are coming, PayPal. That is a new phenomenon that's hitting all of us very quickly. So if I were to say anything in regards to this is talk to your advisors, talk to your bankers, talk to your insurance folks, really understand what's going on in regards to their recommendations. You make recommendations and most of us are going, geez, I don't want to have to use RSAs. That is just an extra step that I just don't have time for. I don't want to do any of the back end reconciliation with what you issue on the check side with really what hits to your bank account. All of those things are really built-in protection for you. And believe me, we catch things when we do that. It has been proven to be successful for you. So use your advisors, make sure that they are in the loop in regards to your business practices, because the lucky thing is it doesn't cost you anything to hear about that, but it can sure save you a lot of money if you maybe take in one or two or three of those things. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to monopolize, but I'm getting all geared up here, so forgive me.
Get after it.
But I also feel like this is one of those things. And, Glenn, you've said it already, and I can't help but reiterate it, is that it is so important to have everybody fully engaged on this.
100%.
as they would personally, right?
Yep.
We would be doing everything we could personally, but my business here, my company that I work for is just as important to all of us, right? We don't want to be that employee that clicks. We don't want to be that employee that accidentally opens up a malware and one of my clients is impacted or Glenn's client
Right.
is impacted. So it is one of those things that it's the train. It's like the fire drill, right? We all hate the fire drill. God, it's loud, you got to go down to the parking lot, but in the end, I know what to do in an emergency because I
Right.
practice fire drill. Likewise, don't ever give up on training employees over and over and over again so that they can kind of start recognizing what's going on. And to Glenn's point earlier about HR being involved, you think, why is HR involved? Well, because they're the ones that have to kind of help enforce that. Listen, we had 5 fraud tests on you and you clicked on 3 of them. We need to improve on that, take them to training, do some more things.
So there's been some interesting questions. You guys are generating a lot of interest here from our audience. And if it's okay, can I start a little bit of Q&A here where we are in our panel?
One more key piece, and then great to segue over because, so I'm going to give a cheat. I call it a cheat. I guess if I was cool, I'd call it a hack, right? Like a cyber hack. No pun intended. So if you get or go out and seek a quotation, so you can purchase cyber risk insurance, and this is not a commercial, and that's the last I'll say of it. But in doing so, your process and you get underwritten, they'll come back to you with a questionnaire. Do you do this, and this? How well do you do this, and this? And then here's a quote. So you, by virtue of their checks and balances, you'll understand what those appropriate things, because let's face it, follow the money. The insurance companies do not want to pay for $1 million cyber breach. They're going to manage what matters. So even just going through the underwriting, if you don't buy the policy, you've gotten better just from being underwritten. If you do buy the policy, one of the key coverages is pre-breach loss prevention. So if you spend $5,000 on a cyber policy, before they ever pay a claim, and if they never pay a claim, call the 1-800 customer service number and have their pre-breach loss prevention team come out and help make you better. That risk management piece, prior to ever having a loss, or even the underwriting process prior to ever having a quote. So I'll leave that.
So,
that time.
Glenn, that's a great point though, because that's I think that falls under the category about being digitally resilient, right? I mean, you're actually writing cybersecurity into an insurance policy for even pre-breaches. I'm not even saying that correctly, but that was a very interesting point.
Yeah, absolutely.
To mitigate risk, and for companies that mid-market companies, small companies, I think that's a very important part. Point to that.
Yes.
So, very interesting point. Where I'm getting, I just wanted, I'm watching the time here, so just please bear with me. Yeah, there's 5 minutes, and I do want to take, you guys generated a lot of interest, so I'm trying to figure out here the best questions. Let's kind of step back and talk. You had some great points on best practices, and some of those best practices were around passwords. And Glenn, I think you even said, don't make your password. So some of the
Sherri's got a great slide, and basically I've got a list of the top 20 USA most used passwords. So of the 20/17 people that are still on here, if Sherri could pop this up, expand this, and if these passwords are currently being used by you, change it. These are the passwords that they use first to try and get into your system. My main point about the passwords is just the best tip I gotta give you on that is add 4 extra digits or characters to the minimum. So if you've got a minimum of 5 letters, 4 numbers, and 2 symbols, add 4 more characters and your password is almost unbreachable. But here's the USA top 20 passwords. First one, password. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Password 1. QWERTY. QWERTY UIP. If you know what, if you go to the very top line of your letters on your keyboard, that's QWERTY UIP. And so, you know, it's so take a look at that. We can get that to everybody later on if need be. I don't want to take, we got 2 or 3 minutes left, but
yeah,
know what's out there. You can even Google this as well.
One of the interesting things too about another point is don't start with a capital and don't end with a number.
Yep.
And then on your mobile device, there is no reason why these things can memorize it. You use face recognition, thumbprint. Let this generate passwords for you. Now, you can't do it for work, but because this toggles between both personal and work, and candidly, cleaning these things up are huge. My kids on this thing, and I don't know what I'm got on here.
What about the concept of a password vault?
I love it. I was just going to say, there's free software that can constantly encrypt itself. It's free. You can download it. You can tie it to your computer, and you can have a password keychain. It's a smart way to go. That's all. That's a good
way.
Yeah, and it's, again, the software is free. It's available. It's out there for nothing.
Well, and I guess if kind of focusing back in on small businesses in particular, we can do that for our devices. But what about the work device, right? So, the integrity, a lot of offices aren't going to allow you to kind of use those sorts of things. What I would suggest for business purposes, change your passwords, manage those well. Don't use the same password throughout your system. Because so much of the fraud is around mobile devices right now, I'm especially sensitive. And mobile devices for banking doesn't always mean just your phone. It means a scanner that's accepting check deposits. It's when you do banking on your phone. Thank goodness many of those are thumbprint or picture ID. So there's a lot of built-in precautions, but use your dual authorization there as well. It's really important. When you can use dual authorizations on financial transactions, it is important. So.
Well, you guys, I'm getting some timing things from our software platform. I can't thank you enough for this wonderful panel, all these best practices and information. You're just a wealth of information, both from your companies, Dallas Capital Bank and Summit Group. Awesome to have shared this panel tonight. And thank you also, both Dallas Capital Bank and Summit Group, for sponsoring this session. Very important, and just enjoyed the time here. And to our audience, thank you for your questions. I know that there's a few that we didn't get to, and I appreciate all the participation. This is going to be a hot topic for many years. I heard today things that are coming in cybersecurity the next 3 years will dwarf what has happened the last 15 years. So I thought that was an interesting statement. So with that, thank you, Glenn and Sherri. Appreciate everything. And I think now I need to turn this back, advise people to please go back to the lobby, check on the top link there for the lobby, and we will see you at the VIP party, which everybody is welcome to attend. And thanks again, Glenn and Sherri.
Thank you all, everybody.
Good night.